This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the 9th episode of Andor. Nobody's listening. Well, let's hope somebody's listening to Coffee with Kenobi, because we've got two great guests to talk about this. Yet again, another gut punch of a show that just merits so much conversation. We've got a returning guest and a brand new guest, not only to do Coffee with Kenobi. Well, that's actually not true. She's kind of been one of the main guest stars on CWK Live for quite a while. Well, first we're going to bring in our returning guest from Podcast Stardust and many other things, my good friend, Dennis Keithley. Dennis, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dan. It's so good to be back. Great to talk to you. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. It's great to chat with you. Now, let's welcome in our new host to the show. Her name is Minta Peloquin. Did I say it correct?
Yeah, you did, Dan. Thank you.
Good. Well, Minta, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. You've been such a great supporter of me and the live show for such a long time. In fact, you're the first one to jump in and say, this is the way it's CWK Day. Minta is the originator of that. So it's great to have you.
It's good to be here.
That's good. What is this like for you so far compared to the live show?
It's definitely a change. I've never really been on a live broadcast before, so I can't even describe the words.
Good. Well, I am very confident. You're always so insightful on the show, and that's going to be great because we've got a lot of crazy stuff. I feel like there's a couple of main cruxes. Ben brought up on CWK Live this week, and I'm a little embarrassed I didn't think about this. But it's like Mon Mothma and Cassian are living these similar parallel lives, where we're going to get to that. First thing we got to do is we're going to give a letter grade, overall reactions, and then one word to describe this entire episode for you. Dennis, we'll start with you.
Okay. So my one word would be anxiety, I think, for this one. I got very anxious watching the episode, and there's a lot of paranoia involved, and this is the most uncomfortable I've ever been watching Star Wars. That being said, it is an A episode because I just find that this series has the best acting and the best dialogue of any Star Wars, bar none.
I don't think so. What's your letter grade? Did you say already?
It'd be an A. It would be an A.
A.
As uncomfortable as it made me, I can't deny the quality.
Okay, fair enough. Minta, what about you?
My one word for this, I also have to say anxiety. It definitely was a tense episode where you saw the 3 different scenarios with all the characters, and you had to wonder, is this going to be like this for the entire season? And I have to say, letter grade wise, definitely an A.
Okay, very good. Gosh, my one word. I never think about these. I know I'm going to ask the question. I never think about the word until I sit down and I ask it. But I think the word for me is oof. I mean, it is like I said, the entire thing is suspenseful. It's certainly anxiety-inducing. But you're on the edge of your seat. I mean, it is, again, another master class in storytelling. I thought I wrote down the writer. I did not. But he's the same. He's been writing the last couple episodes for this arc. And I would give it an A. The only reason I'm not giving it an A+ is because when it was done, I didn't feel like I just was on an escape from reality. I felt like I was just in the prison alongside with Cassian. But there are so many great things to talk about here. Some interesting evolutions, some tragic things. Perhaps we've seen the catalyst will push Cassian forward to decide he wants to be an active member of the rebellion instead of fighting his own one-man war. So we will certainly see. But the way I see it is, Cassian and Mon Mothma are living. They're both in prisons, right? Neither of them are of their own design. Cassian's is much more direct. He's on this prison. He's in this prison itself, not miming, but doing this work. And I feel like the acting here, all across the board, as you mentioned, is so good. I mean, not only is it the main people at this table, but every single table in that room. I mean, who knows how many times they've practiced and rehearsed this and going through the actions and whatever they are building. I'm assuming it's Death Star related, but I have no idea. It's just so flawless and seamless. It's so beautifully done, and it's all under this background of this white, pristine atmosphere. But everything that's going on is quite far from light or hope. It's very much carries over to the last one. That, you know, like you both said, the anxiety here is just overwhelming.
It is indeed, and if you're just focusing on the prison here, you've got these people who are isolated in a community, and they've got a shared grief. They've got a for lack of a better word, they've got a shared trauma that they're going through right now, which is they spend 12 hours on the floor. They spend 12 hours in the room. While they're in that room, they can talk. If anyone else is willing to talk to them, they can get this flavorless food most of the time. Anything they want to do, their personal business is done in front of everybody else. We got to see in the last episode, they have a communal shower, and then it's back on the floor, and they're all pushing each other to build these things as quickly as possible. They do have a little bit of community there because, you know, it's like, Ulaf, let's get going, you know, back, get your hands off. And they, Kino is really looking out for Ulaf later, saying, you know, you've just got a few more shifts and you're out of here. Let's just get him going so he can live. But Cassian calls it. Nobody's listening. The Empire doesn't have to care about these people. They put them in a situation that is bleak. They've given them a false sense of hope by their little countdowns in their cells. But Cassian knows it. This is all one big false promise that they're working towards. And it's tragic in that regard.
Absolutely. I mean, the Empire doesn't see them as people. They see them as numbers. It's not too different from the real world where, like in retail, you're a number, you're not a person. And for these prisoners, you know, they think they're getting this great deal. Oh, you know, we work a few hours for a while, we're going to be out. No, you're just going to be in an endless loop until you die in this prison. You're never going to get out. You're never going to see anybody again. You're basically nothing.
And it's really something. I think that really plays out at the end too. When let's see, what is the name of the older gentleman? I know I wrote his name down. Ulaf, Ulaf. When he has his massive stroke, and the doctor is working on him, or at least checking him out. I mean, it's pretty clear right away that there's nothing he can do, and it's not like he doesn't even have any agency to do anything about it. He's as much a prisoner as any of them. It's almost like, even though he's a doctor, he's more like a vet. I mean, really, because the Empire treats him like animals anyway. And he, you know, Cassian says, call him by his name, and he says, don't tell me his name. Don't tell me. Like, he doesn't want to know. He's completely trying to disassociate himself from this emotional weight that is going on. But while that's also going on, Cassian starts to have like this plan, and it's super unclear. He just goes over this panel, like he says, you know, what does he say? He doesn't say he's on a break, but he says he's like going for a walk or something like that. Did anybody catch what he actually says?
Oh, so I'm going for my run or something like that.
Yeah.
Or a break
like
or something.
Yeah,
something like that. Oh yeah, he does say, I'm taking my run. So he goes over this panel and he opens it up and he's got this saw, and he's like sawing this pipe to one end. I mean, it must be somewhat escape related, because he's talking to this other gentleman that's at a table by that hallway, and everything is so clean and sterile. They want to keep him healthy because they want him to keep working. But then again, if they die, they'll just bring another person right in. And there's this great like detective work where they're bringing a new prisoner and they have everybody assume program, put their arms up, and then they make note that whenever someone touches that, like the railing, they're not getting shocked. So then they decide, we're going to jump up here and let's go now. But then they don't. And, you know, I feel like the great thing that Star Wars does is there's little things that obviously happen that we are not privy to see. But it is definitely setting up the fact, like throughout this whole thing, I never feel like Cassian loses hope, even for a little bit. So I you know, I'm sort of torn on that. I guess he's such a fighter and he's been through so much that does make sense to me. But there's a part of me that feels like surely this will be a moment where he just is lost. But I never get that from the performance.
He's always playing an angle on this. He's always observing. We got to see how many episodes was it when they were in Aldani and they're planning the heist, and he was able to name off which hand everybody uses, and just by being observant. And then later, when people were starting to get cold feet, he was pointing out it's always toughest the day before, and everyone's getting cold feet. Yeah, I'm afraid. You're afraid too, but don't let me be the excuse for when we're going in there. He's very good at reading people. He's very good at picking up on details in a situation, and he works on Kino throughout this episode. You've only got 216 days left, I think is what it was when they're talking in their cells. Mm-hmm. How many guards are on each station? And then he makes that, he plants that seed in Kino's mind. It's like, we can say anything we want. No one's listening. They don't care about us. They don't have to care. Cassian is always looking at a plan. He's always looking for a way out of there. And yeah, he experiences fear. He experiences anxiety, but he's good at putting all that stuff behind him. He does not let it get in his way of what he needs to do. Contrasted with Kino, who, as he realizes his opportunity to get out on time over the course of this episode is starting to slip away, he breaks down and he starts taking it out on the other men. He punches, I think it's Melshi at one point.
Yeah, he does.
And is screaming at everybody. And he's used to being in control. He just doesn't realize he's not.
I mean, do either of you think that this makes him a little less relatable because he doesn't seem, he's clearly bothered and he's desperate to get out. But the fact that there are no cracks in the armor, and anyway, even like in his times of reflection, I can't tell if that's a good or a bad thing.
It made me borderline. He wants to remain in control like it was previously stated, but deep down, he's starting to break because he's seeing some form of chaos happening, like what they mentioned with level 2, all the men got fried. You could tell he was really disturbed, but he's thinking to himself, just keep your head down. You're going to be fine. They'll let you go. And then what happened to his friend there? He's starting to break. He's thinking, okay, nope, I'm ready to go. I want to get out of here. This guy could probably help me out.
Absolutely. But who's not getting help is Yulof. I mean, there is a cool moment where Cassian, like how he continues to establish trust and strength with his group. And if I understand it correctly, and please either of you help me clear it up for me because I'm not 100% sure. Does he I don't know if he switches his sentence with somebody else, but he basically says, hey, one of you gets the next break or you get to leave sooner, or what was that about? Because they all looked at him like they really trust him when he switches with Yulof, and then Kino comes over and says, whose idea was this? And then Cassian points to the next man. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, because he switched with Yulof in order to take over that part of the job so they could maintain the speed with which they were working, because they were in the running to win.
They're just one ahead.
Right. And then when Kino comes over, he asks whose idea was, I think he said Tigo's, or the guy that's sitting to his right. And he was trying to give him some credit, to give him some props. It's what you were saying, Dan. It was that leadership ability of his by making him look good with the person that's in charge. Because for his gruff exterior, Kino does care about the other men that are in there. We see how much he cares about Yulof there towards the end of the episode, but he's always encouraging them because it makes him look good too. If the teams and the tables do well, then he looks good. And so, Cassian is a natural at building these relationships because he doesn't need the glory. He doesn't need the attention.
No, he truly doesn't care. I'm glad I haven't heard anyone say that this is like a Han Solo character, because it's just absolutely not even close. I mean, Han, I don't know if Han would love the glory, but he wouldn't mind it. He doesn't care. He's there. I mean, there is no swagger to Cassian Andor, but there's just so much grit, and he is just a natural leader. He's unassuming, but he's also unaccepting of anything that isn't what it needs to be in his mind. And I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but his resilience knows no bounds. And I really like that about him. I just still can't decide if he's one of the great things about classical mythology is the heroes that stand the test of time are the ones that, for all their strengths, they have flaws and foibles, and they make them more relatable. Now, I do think Cassian is like that because his arrogance and his pride have certainly caused a lot of problems. I mean, let's just ask Bix that, for example. I mean,
Oof,
we can even talk about Bix. That whole thing is painful. But Minta, I mean, take it away. What do you want to say about Bix and the opening sequences with her?
Oh my God. I mean, that was painful to watch. You can tell she really wanted to keep Cassian out of harm's way, but that device they put on her, it definitely looked like a headpiece, like a hearing device of sorts, but almost like Chinese water torture. It played endless loops of screaming children, which can be torturous to anyone. And you can imagine after a while that can take a toll on your mental status and emotional status and eventually break down. Now, if she revealed what happened with Cassian when she last contacted him is unknown. Maybe she did it, maybe she didn't, but she was in really rough shape after that event.
It was very upsetting, and anytime it seems like there's always these creepy doctors that initiate, or they usually do it as a dentist, like an Alias or something like that. But these are like there's called the Dizonite Massacre, Dizonites, the Dizonites, and so what they say that they wiped them out because they were interfering with the Empire's reach. They didn't like the Empire being there. Of course, they didn't like the Empire being there, and they like adjust some frequencies and they like do some sound mixing. And they make you listen to this, and I don't know if it's the high frequency or the emotional thing, but the Empire, it's just sort of, it's wild to me that we've always known the Empire was terrible, the Empire was evil, and we really didn't see much of that besides the little we saw in the original trilogy, and most of that was focused on stormtroopers and Darth Vader, and of course at the end with Palpatine. Then with Rebels, we got quite a bit more. Certainly with Attack of the Clones, we saw how nasty the Emperor was and is. But the Empire's methods of torture and their war crimes against humanity of all races in the Star Wars galaxy, it really has taken this to another level. You mentioned earlier, Dennis, that this is like the best acted and the best written. It's also the most mature Star Wars by far. And I've been really vocal at first. I wasn't crazy about that. But now I absolutely realize the value and the importance of this and the gravitas it's adding. There are so many people that I know that are not watching it because it's not like Star Wars, quote, end quote. But I've been telling people, no, this is a great show. This doesn't even have to have the word Star Wars attached to it. Besides some occasional blaster fire or a TIE fighter, this could just be a great espionage show. It could be a Mission Impossible. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah, and what happened to Bix is exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of this episode when I said this is the most uncomfortable I've ever been watching Star Wars. There has been torture in Star Wars before. Vader tortured Leia in A New Hope in the very first anything Star Wars we ever had, but that was off screen. And then we were told later that her resistance to the mind probe, was off the charts, and she did a great job. And then, of course, there's things like Borgullet, but again, mainly off screen. We saw what happened to Bix right there in front of us. We saw an incredible piece of acting as she trembled and then she screamed, and just how wide her eyes got. It's very upsetting. And I watched this episode twice today, and I stopped 3 times before that scene because I knew it was coming, and it was really, really uncomfortable to deal with. And the other part of that is that you got Dr. Gorst, who has pioneered this thing, who has taken the dying screams of this species because they noticed 3 of their officers cowering behind a panel on a Star Destroyer later and how it affected them. And he delighted in how he was able to weaponize this and turn it into an instrument of torture. And he's just grinning at Bix and talking about how effective it is. He's so malicious. He's so mean. He's so evil on that. And he's so proud of it. And, there's so many villains in Star Wars that despite the bad things they do, you kind of think they're cool and they're someone you want to see dressed up as a concept. I just want to throttle that guy. This is not one of them at all. And so, it was well acted. I mean, this show, more than anything else that's happened in Star Wars, really lays bare the sins of the Empire for us. And we sometimes make excuses for various people who serve the Empire that they got caught up in this machine, but they get caught up and then they fully embrace it. And they take on the characteristics of the Emperor and this willingness to do this evil to get the job done, all in the name of some sort of fictitious security.
The nature of evil is very, very realistic and disturbing. His name is Pack, who was the person was in that chair before Bix, and that Imperial when Daedra is leaving, he says, "Let's hang him," and she's like, "Sure, if you want." I mean, that's not verbatim, but it's really, really. It's just rough, but then again, in the same breath, it's just really compelling. But so is all the stuff with Mon Mothma. I do want to talk about her. We didn't talk about her enough last week, but I think she's really cool and captivating. I mentioned earlier, she's very much in a prison, in her own way. In fact, when Vel comes to visit, which was a cool surprise, she even comments on, you're just all trapped here in your own little box.
And that is true. I mean, people who are in higher up, such as Mon Mothma, they don't experience what Cassian and others are experiencing from the Empire. They don't get tortured. They don't get mutilated. They don't get poked and prodded. They only see, their wealth being distributed to the Empire, and they don't understand what's happening with the citizens down below. I mean, that's what happened with Padme in one of the earlier Clone Wars episodes. She got a chance to see what was happening on Mandalore, on the outskirts of the planet. These people were suffering while they were living in luxury, eating all this good food, living in comfort, having a roof over their heads. Unless they were on the battlefield themselves, they have no idea how bad the situation is.
My favorite part is when Vel gets some good zings in at Mon Mothma's husband. And, again, we see the interplay with her unusual family or uncomfortable family dynamic, because the whole thing's uncomfortable. But my favorite shot, I think, in this episode is when Vel leaves and the camera pans back and Mon Mothma is just standing there by herself, like as a silhouette, and you just see this beautiful ornate goldenness design of where they live on Coruscant, and she's standing very regal and with her head up, but she's all alone, and it's just cold. It's cold and emotionless, very much like Narkina 5. And I really thought that was a powerful way to showcase her veritable prison, even though there are no specific bars per se, and how she is feeling that based on our conversation with her cousin too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I may have missed it before. I did not realize that she was cousins with Vel into this episode, and maybe that wasn't supposed to be revealed.
That was the new reveal here, yes.
Right. But one of the other similarities was to Cassian's situation is when they're in that prison and the various prisoners are doing that sign language across the tunnels, and they're getting imperfect communication. And then Vel is standing in Mon Mothma home, and they can't have an open conversation. They are trying to talk around things. They can't mention Luthen's name. And so it's a little unclear, who is Vel spying for? Is it Mon Mothma or Luthen in this case? But Mon Mothma keeps imploring Vel to take some time off, to pretend to be the spoiled rich girl, to set up the facade to protect herself. But all along, they communicate, but they don't say everything that needs to be said between them, just like what's happening in that prison.
Right. That's absolutely right. And I love that. I love how, we don't know how they learn to communicate per se, but when I saw the last week's episode, I thought that he's been doing those actions in that factory so much that he just can't stop himself, like something like a nerve thing, almost like nerve damage and some sort of psychosis. But now you start to realize it is actually communication, which the Empire wants to shut down. Andy Serkis's character very much says, Kino, he says, it takes a week for information to get down here. So that's the part where you've got to believe that Kino believes something is amiss, because this is a fictional universe where you can pull up a hologram and talk to somebody across the galaxy, but they can't get information around here on this planet unless, the steel or whatever is going on is so thick that they can't communicate with the radio waves or whatever they have at their disposal. But I really enjoyed, all that being said, I really like seeing Kino, the cracks in Kino's armor slowly breaking down. And part of it is the title of the episode, Nobody's Listening. And they even put an exclamation point in the title of the episode, which I really like the touch of that. But he says, do you ever think about escaping? And Kino threatens him, but it feels like an empty threat. And then he basically wants to say, how many guards on each level? Is that what he asks?
Yeah.
So let's talk about Kino. To me, one of my new favorite characters so far, although he hasn't done much yet. I just love seeing how he is slowly starting to realize everything I'm doing is not only for the wrong reasons, but it's not doing anything for me. And it's hard to really look in the mirror like that when you've been trying to fight for something that you find out doesn't exist.
Kino is a new twist on that old trope of I'm 3 days to retirement that the police officer goes through, like right before they get shot and die. They got 3 days left. We've seen some movies, except for Kino is looking out. I've got 200 days before I get to get out of this prison. And he's not willing to let anybody get in the way with that. And so when Cassian's asking him about, how many guards, he's like, not answering that question. I'm not getting involved in that. I am not doing anything to ruin my chances of getting out of here. And then when those rumors start coming up about something going on level 2 on the far side that they can't see, it's a tunnel that's on the far side. That's why all those hand gestures are so desperate. And he's so desperate for that to be a false rumor, because if something's going wrong on level 2, then that jeopardizes his opportunity to get out of there. And then naturally at the end, when the medic, who's a prisoner himself, saying, Cassian is like, no one's getting out of here, right? And he's like, yeah, nobody's getting out of here. A guy that was on level 4 showed up on level 2. They figured it out. They had to kill everybody. And so Kino's hope just gets completely destroyed. And so he goes ahead and he answers that question. What he's been living for and threatening and ruling his room with an iron fist just got wiped out. And so now now he's willing to help, because what has he got to lose?
Well, we're cheaper than droids and easier to replace.
Yeah, that's a harsh line.
Yeah,
harsh.
Talk about that.
I mean, you think about it, droids are more expensive to replace because you have to find the parts, you have to find the wiring, find the people to do it. People, on the other hand, they age out. Like what happened to Kyo's friend there. He aged out. He had a stroke because he was overworked. And all they have to do is just replace another body with another body with another body with droids. Unless you have the dough, it's impossible. So what's going to be more cost effective, dumping a droid or dumping a person? From their perspective, person is nothing. Droids are more valuable than a living creature.
And they're programmable.
Exactly.
Which also makes you wonder why they discontinued the clone program. But I guess,
Well, and to Minta's point, how did Cassian end up here? He did nothing. He had no due process. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he got charged and then sentenced. There was no due process and all of that. And so it's cheaper than ever to get human labor in this prison, because you just pull someone off the street, charge them with anything, and under this PORD that they've been talking about with the Empire, all the sentences are magnified. You throw them in there for 6 years, and as they get towards that end of that 6 years, if they make it that far, they don't actually get out. You end up just recycling them through this program and potentially on the other side of the block so that no one recognizes them and word doesn't get out. This is exactly what Luthen was talking about when Mon Mothma confronted him about, you want to cause, this is going to cause suffering. He's like, that's the idea, because this suffering is getting more people aware of what the Empire is doing. And then Deidre was exactly right. The Empire played right into Luthen and the Rebellion's hands by going to these extremes. And, to borrow a line from Rebels, this is the spark that ignites the rebellion across the galaxy.
Well, Val even says, because Mon Mothma says, what have we done? And and the first time I watched it, I didn't quite make that out, but I usually try to watch it the second time through with closed captions because you pick up some of the nuance. And when she says, "What have we done?" and she's like legitimately like scared. And you don't typically picture Mon Mothma as scared because in Rebels and in Return of the Jedi and in Rogue One, all you see is like this fearless, stoic, steadfast leader. But seeing her humanity is pretty great. And then Vel says, we're fighting against the dark, which goes nicely with what you both said. We're fighting against the dark, which is why when they pan off and she's looking into light, she's the only light shining there, but she feels like she's so alone. And I just really, really think that's just so interesting. Let's speaking of interesting, we got to talk about Syril, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, what is his deal? I mean, feel free, one of you, to kind of take us off from there.
He was complacent for the longest time at his previous job. So when he was let go from that job and forced back to his mother's home, he had no place to go. Sorry about that. I just heard my little dog barking.
That's all right.
And to have his mother have him look for a job and ending up at the bottom of the barrel to work his way up, he feels like he's not justified. And I think he's slowly, in his own way, realizing something's not right here. Why am I being treated like a nobody? It isn't until he gets noticed by Daedra. Is it Daedra?
Mm-hmm. Daedra. Mm-hmm.
That he's starting to feel valued again, but I think he's getting a bit of a creepy stalker vibe from this past episode. It's like, no, no, a creepy stalker, obsessive. That could go either way with him at this point.
Oh yeah, it's like the fan fiction is just writing itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Creepiness runs in that family.
Yes,
because the mother is saying things to him like, what is the return on my investment? You're disinterested in me could have caused me to lose hope and break down and not be involved. And here I am. I had faith in you. What's the return on my investment? And so he finally says, well, I got this promotion. But then later, he shows up and completely steps out of the shadows to intercept Agent Miro there. And she's like, what are you doing? And then she tries to leave and he grabs her arm. He's completely infatuated. He says something along the lines of like, being in your presence, I realize life is worth living.
Coming out strong there, Syril.
Yeah,
that's not a good opening line at all. I mean, it's one thing if you say it to your spouse,
line.
but she turns around and says like, you have any idea how much trouble you're in? If you do this again, I'll throw you in a cage in the outer rim. And frankly, she should have done it because he's lost it. I had some hope for that character, but it all vanished in this episode. He completely creeped me out. Yeah.
Oh, I've never had any hope for him, but he's like watching sort of an accident. It's just like, it's going to happen. Part of you just can't look away. You're just so horrified by it. I mean, his relationship with his mother isn't a typical loving, altruistic mother. That is completely just loves because, like without any strings attached. And she looks at him as like a commodity or like a show pony. And, oh, you're wearing your high collar now. What, you must think you're pretty fancy. And the way she treats him, I look around and she snoops in his room. And he says, I have ways of knowing it. Like parents and kids don't talk like that to each other. I mean, and I think that's by design. I think this is excellent, top of the line dialogue that's on a superior level to a lot of things you'll see. But I like that they have such an artificial relationship because they're artificial people. And it's really beautifully sort of punctuated by after, he, like you said, he announces his promotion. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, and she like fixes his shirt and she seems like proud of him. But it's just only because it reflects on her. It has nothing to do with her son. And then he picks up his cereal and he just slams it, like his act of defining his mother, slamming a little piece of cereal into his cereal, which he's still eating. So he's a child. Like he may be a superior intellect when it comes to military strategy and espionage, but he emotionally, his IQ is quite low. And you see this with the opening line, or not the opening line, but just how he talks to her. And he talks about justice and a dream worth clinging to, are things that she inspires in him. And yet there does, and I'm not like a shipping guy. Like, I'm the least shipping person ever. But this, like, she's intrigued by him. I think he sees her not only as a way out, but he's drawn to her because she is almost like the physical embodiment of everything he thinks that the Empire is. And she's blonde, and he likes her. He seems to, or at least he draws strength and power from her, because all of his, we only have these two examples, but his connections with a woman are all very strange and unhealthy. And so of course it makes sense that this would translate into another one. So whatever comes of that, I don't know, but this isn't an accident. I mean, we did spend an interesting amount of time in the middle of this episode on that situation. So, because I literally wrote down ambush and flirting, ... question mark.
He's bad at it.
Yeah. No,
He's so bad at it.
He's bad at it.
That is not my idea of flirting. That is
No, it's not.
That's like Law and Order SVU special space investigation right there.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And on top of that, it's right. It is the guy who doesn't know better who is approaching her. She is what he wants to be. He wants to be in the ISB. He wants to be the one tracking down these rebel groups. He feels like he's not being listened to by anybody, and she paid him a little bit of attention, and therefore he's worshiping at her altar, so to speak. And he's not taking the hint that she had a job to do, and her attention should not be interpreted as anything other than what it was, a means to an end. She had information that she wanted. He had it. She interrogated him, and he called it an interview and a conversation. She said, that's not what this was at all. And so, and he's desperate to fulfill this fantasy that he's got of someday being the man that's cuffing Cassian Andor and bring him in for imperial justice for what happened to those two security officers that harassed Cassian at the beginning of the series. It set this whole thing off. And he doesn't get that nobody else is buying into this fan fiction of his, that he's, this fantasy of his that he's set up.
It's great. It's great. I said earlier in the month or last month, reminds me of Battlestar Galactica. It's just got great science fiction, political espionage level drama. And it's just absolutely scintillating to watch. And it's very squeamish, but yet again, we can't keep our eyes off it because it just, so well done and executed. There's a little bit of a side thing here with they captured a rebel pilot who's using a stolen Imperial masking unit. That's kind of how Data is trying to track down whatever Cassian is doing. That whole notion of them hunting Cassian down to kill him is just sort of gone by the wayside because nobody's really available to do anything about it because other things have risen up. But at the end of this episode, we talked about it at the beginning of Coffee with Kenobi this week, but when Olaf dies and he has that massive stroke and they have to put him out of his misery, Cassian has to hold his feet. Kino has to hold him up above, and they're asking, and that's when they find out, look, people were released on 4 and there was a mistake and they were back on 2. And rather than fix it or whatever, they just kill everybody. We're not. And then he's like, we're not getting out. And that's the moment when Kino snaps and he just looks at the doctor and he's just angry. And Andy Serkis is just a tremendous actor, another level of acting. And that's when he is like, I'm not getting out. All of this was for nothing. I have wasted my life. And instead of being upset and like curling into a ball, he's Cassian says again, how many guards? And he says, no more than 12. And that's boom. That is how the episode ends. I have goosebumps now to say it because this show is a masterclass in ending every episode with this massive hook of you can't wait to see what is going to happen next. And there are only 2 episodes left. So do either of you want to talk about that? We also get the name. It's Davo Skolden. He's supposed to be a banker that's going to help finance Mon Mothma sort of subtly so that they don't, when they look into her books, they don't realize 400,000 credits are missing. but she says he's a thug. So I feel like that's really going to come into play later too. A lot of great threads going on, a lot of questions being asked, and again, only 2 episodes left. So closing thoughts, Minta or Dennis?
I think the next episode, it's going to be chaotic. Something's going to happen in that prison. Something's going to happen within Daedra's group. It's going to be just mass chaos all around. And if we get a second season after the final episode, I think then, that'd be awesome.
We're getting 11 episodes.
12, isn't it?
What's that?
I think it's 12 because they're doing 4 3-episode arcs for 1 year apiece.
That might be true. I missed that. I'm not a good math guy.
That's all right.
No, I mean, they just say don't get attached to a lot of these characters. I think we're going to see a lot of characters we've already gotten attached to get scrapped away. And it's just going to be chaos, but in a way, it's going to lead up to Rogue One and then lead up to A New Hope. It's going to just all connect in the end in some shape or form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be, because the second season because this is 5 years before Rogue One, and the next one is going to be from years 4 all the way to right before when Rogue One starts. So we're going to get big key moments in Cassian's life throughout, which will open up the door to all kinds of fill-in stories, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping they sneak K2SO in there somewhere.
Oh, you know they will.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
I'm
what
with
about
you, Dan.
What about Grand Admiral Thrawn? You think that he might get sneaked into that one of those seasons?
Oh, that'd be cool. I don't know. We're not big speculators, but I don't know. That would certainly be wonderful. I would like to see Kanan Jarrus personally, but that's just me.
That would be wicked.
Yes.
I'm with you, Dan. I really love the end of this when Kino had that realization that I'm not getting out of this. And so my best shot, what do I have to lose? I'll answer the question this time. And when he was completely shutting it down because he wanted to protect his last 216 days, now he's open to it. Beyond that, the acting that Genevieve O'Reilly did in that scene as Mon Mothma talking to Tay about having to cover up the missing money because there's going to be a scan coming and then she's going to be accused of some sort of fraud. And he, as an attorney, I'm used to this. You come to your clients with solutions, not problems. And so he's trying to come up with a solution, but it's distasteful, but it's the only option they have. And she doesn't like it, but she knows it. And so you know that something's going to come of that. And so she's going to have to get involved with someone that she finds distasteful in there. And it just makes me admire her more for it because this is, the paranoia element of this is that she's got the Empire already overlooking her shoulder. She was completely disrespected in the Senate when she was arguing against that legislation that Yularen was talking about a few episodes, the PORD, and then she's accusing the Empire of overreach. And then you've got these other senators that are just turning off their platforms to signify their displeasure and how much they dislike her. It's completely rude and it's completely unwarranted and disrespectful, but she just keeps plowing forward and, she's at home and there's no relief for her there. Val brings that dress for her daughter, Leda. And, she says something like, oh, your father's not going to, may not let you wear that. She's like, he'll let me do anything, just throws it right back in her face. And she just puts on the smile, but we all know better. That turmoil that she's going through. I really admire the job that Genevieve is doing with this and how amazing a character Mon Mothma has been in this series.
Yeah, it's been a really pleasant, welcome surprise. And if anything, this year's because these will be called Cassian and Mon Mothma, even though they never shared a single second of screen time together.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was even better than expected. I had very high hopes for the two of you, and you both, of course, brought your A games. As always, Dennis, please let everybody know where they can find you and Podcast Stardust.
Right. So you can find me and my good friend Dre Krebs 3 times a week on Podcast Stardust, which is available on any podcatcher that you might be using. We are celebrating 3 years this month. And
Congratulations. That's
thank you.
Fast.
And it's been fun. Dan, you were invited me on to Coffee with Kenobi, which is the first podcast I was ever on. And here I am all these years later, having done 2 shows. And so here we are. But if you want to catch us with us on social media, pretty much all the platforms. We're at Podcast Stardust.
Love it. And thank you, Dennis, of course, as always, for being on here, for being such a good friend.
Absolutely.
Minta, congratulations, my friend. You passed the audition. You did a terrific job, as I knew you would.
Thank
you.
you.
It. You survived. You're still smiling. We appreciate your insights. Where can people reach out to you if they want to chat with you about some Star Wars?
Well, I'm local on Facebook, on Twitter, or even through my husband's Facebook page, J-Rim Pirates, where we do our work for conventions and so forth. Like, see if I can, some of the artwork my husband's done the past number of months.
Cool.
He's done Star Wars and Power Rangers, so things like that. But yeah, any form of social media, I am reachable.
And very active in the CWK Cafe.
Absolutely. Very active there.
Well, thank you again, Minta and Dennis. Thank you both so much.
Oh, pleasure.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.